Hi, Theresia. Thanks so much for joining us today to learn a little bit more about your experience with JumpCloud. So before we get going, can you maybe tell us a little bit about yourselves, your role, and what you do within your MSP?
Good morning, Chris. Yeah, my name is Theresia. I'm working with Tavanca. It's a managed service provider. We're helping small to medium businesses to manage their IT. And we're based and located in Vancouver, Canada. And I'm super excited to be here today.
No, we're excited to have you. And I think you're the first Canadian guest we've had so far. So we're excited to have you too. And Vancouver's a beautiful place. So I hear. I've never managed to get over there, but fingers crossed one day soon. So around your MSP, I mean, how long has it been going?
We are in our third year. So 3.5 years. We started just before COVID.
Okay, and you mentioned that you work with small to medium-sized businesses, which is typical for, I'd say, the majority of MSPs that I'm speaking to. But is there a particular size of business that you work well with, or do you specialize in a particular vertical, or are you just working with general small to medium businesses?
Great question. So we work with clients that are usually located in Vancouver, at least the headquarters here. We have some clients that have like second or third locations around the world, like either in Canada, the US, or in Europe. However, ideally the headquarters here, and there are at least 10 staff members, I would say, because that's when it's becoming a little bit too much to handle for the business owner to look after all the configurations, the settings, setups, and just keep everything updated. But it's also a good size to start managing and really like looking after the whole infrastructure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that kind of brings on to another question, which is around those sort of 10 users and above, which is a kind of your sweet spot. Are you generally taking the role as the IT department there, or do some of them have IT staff internally as well?
So we're generally like the full managed provider. However, we have also started the co-managing bigger companies where we come in with the security experience and just advise them. We do have security assessments that I run like with our clients every half year. And then if we co-manage, it depends on the client's needs. It could be like every quarter or once a year, depending on what they choose. And then we just advise them.
Okay. And would you say that the cyber requirements from a regulation point of view are different in Canada to the US to the UK, for example? Is it more regulated there, would you say?
They're different a little bit, especially for like any organizations that handle sensitive data, for example, like medical office, law companies. They have to store their data on Canadian soil. And but in general, I would say cyber security, it's like globally. So no matter where you go, there are certain like cyber hygienes that users should take care of. And we're trying to teach like basic, give users basic trainings and then look after specifics, regulations within Canada as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a global thing, but in the UK, there's some government initiatives, and I know in Australia and different parts of the world, people are tackling it in a different way, but the problem's the same everywhere. I guess it's just how it's being dealt with. Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to your relationship with JumpCloud. One of the questions I always like to ask, because our marketing department are always interested, if no one else, is how did you initially hear about JumpCloud and why were you attracted to JumpCloud?
So we actually started to get in touch with JumpCloud about like 3.5 years ago when we onboarded their first client. I've heard about it before, but I've never really worked with JumpCloud. And then when we onboarded the client, they already had the infrastructure in place. So it was more like jumping right into it, which was great. And then, when I started working with it, I really liked it because everything's there. Everything is like simplified and intuitive. You just have to go through the portal and
Yeah, that's good to hear. And so that was a particular client that had the JumpCloud requirement, and then you kind of started from there, or did you plan to push JumpCloud out to all of your clients?
Right. So the one client was where we started, and then we've onboarded like a few more clients. And wherever it makes sense, we do try to implement JumpCloud, especially if they have just like, let's say they're a smaller company under 10 users, they start with building like their like local users as their infrastructure. They don't have a server in place because everything is like cloud-based nowadays. But they don't have like a really connection in the infrastructure. So that's when we're trying to build up JumpCloud.
Yeah, fascinating. And a typical client of yours is that you mentioned everything's in the cloud now, which is pretty common, but is that a mixed sort of Microsoft, Google, or mainly Microsoft cloud? How do you do that?
A lot of the times, yes. So it really depends again on the needs and the preference of the clients. Sometimes they just have Microsoft 365 because the applications, they're set up with the email, but sometimes they are set up with Google Workspace, let's say, but they still like to work with Microsoft applications. And then it just becomes like a whole mess in terms of managing password management. So in that case, JumpCloud has this amazing functions with single sign-on, or like pushing the multi-factor authentication that we can leverage, and it makes it much easier to like manage everything in the background.
Yeah, no, I think I'm beginning to see that more and more where people have got these mixed environments, whereas before MSPs a lot of them would just be Microsoft or just be Google, but now it's not as straightforward because the clients are wanting different things. And I guess it's the same with the devices themselves. Are you a mixture of sort of Windows devices, Mac and Linux as well?
Yeah, correct. Like we have just a few, like really a handful Linux devices. However, depending on the client, sometimes they just have Windows, sometimes they have only Macs, but loads of them have hybrids. And it really depends on the position where the users are. Let's say you have an architect company and you have the office manager that that is happy to work on a Mac device, but then you have CAD technicians or designers, and they have like their training on Windows devices, and then it's easier for them to like keep this going. So that's when the hybrid comes in and you're trying to juggle in between.
Yeah, that's good. And Linux, I always mention Linux because I'm sure one day someone's going to say that yes, they use it. I've never seen anyone use a Linux device as a daily sort of desktop, but I think there are people in JumpCloud that do, but I think it's a special breed, maybe engineers or technical people.
I agree. I don't think like Linux is like spread that much between users that work in different professions, like architects or in the medical field. They just want to have their devices working. And I feel like Linux is more for us technicians to play a little bit around.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So moving on to the next section around the benefit that JumpCloud for your clients. I mean, you've touched upon some already, but what are the sort of pain points that JumpCloud helps you overcome with your clients?
Yeah, as I mentioned, like the biggest one, I think, is when they don't have a server or infrastructure in place. They were just working on local devices or local administrators, like administrators, not even standard users, and just getting in this structure and connecting not only the devices, but also the firewall and like the whole network itself, and then making it easy to manage. Because when clients hire us, we're an external IT, we're not like on their site every day. So we need to be able to manage everything remotely and set it up so that it's easier for the user. Like all the onboarding is simplified because we're using less time when we onboard a new device or new user. Even when a new user just comes into the office, we can quickly ask them to turn on the device, configure it in the background, and the user is there pretty much in a blink, because it's so instant that JumpCloud syncs nowadays. I feel like 3-4 years ago, or like 3.5 years ago, it took a little bit, like 5 to 10 minutes to sync, but nowadays it's the user's just there. So
that's great. And you hit upon the sort of magic MSP word there, which is around time saving, I guess, is that the time is money in the MSP sort of model, as you know. So I guess that the quicker that you can onboard clients and get things up and running is beneficial for, keeps the client happy, and it obviously helps you manage your sort of service desk more efficiently and get more done. So that's great to hear that you're using it for that.
Yeah, I also like the policies and like scripts that you can use in JumpCloud. That is less. I do still think it's beneficial for the client, but also for us. For example, like the updates on a Mac, you can just like run them smoothly without the user really noticing. And then almost my favorite function, I discovered this like 2-3 years ago, like while in, that you can block certain things for a user, that the Mac, that they don't run the updates themselves, because we had issues in between where a user would just push the button and then other applications stopped working. We had to roll back, and JumpCloud was an amazing solution for that one, just blocking this one particular field and still leaving the users all other abilities so they can like interact with their devices that they need.
Yeah, it's a nice feature for sure. And it shows I guess one of the challenges that we as MSPs have is that some users will never update their devices, and some will just update the devices whenever they see an update, do it straight away. So I guess you're trying to sit in the middle and control that process a little. So when looking at the kind of JumpCloud product, as you say, you've been working with it for a while now and it's changed a lot. I mean, are you still working mainly around the identity access management, or are you using some of the newer features around password management or remote control yet?
So we actually haven't used the password manager, or like I've tried the remote control, but it wasn't working at that time, and we have our own systems in place. However, yeah, I'm completely curious to try this out again. The password manager, I also haven't tried yet, but that's on my list.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to continue to hopefully see additional products being added on to JumpCloud as we go. So looking from an advice hat on, if you were speaking with an MSP at an event that you attended and you mentioned JumpCloud, what advice would you give them in terms of how would you explain JumpCloud to them? How would you say that they could be successful with JumpCloud?
For sure, especially if they're starting out, I would say to test it out really for themselves, trying to break things. That's how I usually approach new technology. Try to break it, try if I can see to fix it and how it's helping me. And then, yeah, just trying to move clients over that are hard to manage at the moment, because there are too many solutions. They have two two shuttered processes where they try to update one device by another, and just really setting a baseline, setting policies, and going from there. Especially like starting with one, really understanding JumpCloud, working with the support if needed, and then going from there, because it's easy to learn. It's, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's quite intuitive. Yeah.
And when you have those conversations with your clients around JumpCloud, how are you pricing that? Are you kind of selling that as a separate line item, or are you bundling the service into your managed service offering? Or just another way, how do you do that?
Yeah, so we are actually doing it as its own individual license monthly, but we are considering switching to an annual contract, because we're happy with JumpCloud. It's working since over 3 years. Actually, the client that we started with, they have been longer with JumpCloud, and it's their main part of the infrastructure. I would almost say the heart of the infrastructure. It integrates with all their systems on site. So it's kind of a no-brainer to trying to to have it as an annual subscription rather than monthly. I do believe, because we just talked with it about it with the account manager, that there was an annual before. I'm not quite sure, but we haven't really explored this option, so we're just in the talks about it.
Okay, so let's move away from JumpCloud a little, because I'm curious about your experience with this. You're obviously well respected in the MSP community and speak to MSPs and know how it works. So I've got a couple of questions on the industry, really, that are kind of linked. But do you see the sort of MSP space continuing to grow over the coming years, or conversely contract? And I guess also, why do you think it's important that SMBs engage with MSPs?
Good question. So yeah, definitely. I see MSPs growing. There are so many MSPs in Vancouver already. We also work with MSPs in the US. I know some in Europe as well, but the main point is technology is part of our life. We are like carrying it everywhere. We're using it everywhere. It's in our homes, in our business. Everyone wants to be more efficient, more productive. So especially with AI coming in, companies are just using it, but they usually just see the benefits where there is a part where it's about IT security, cybersecurity. And that's usually not looked at from the company's perspective, because they would just want to have things faster, things better. But the users who are implementing this, who are playing around with it, sometimes they don't look at the configurations, they don't see the risks, or if it's implemented once, they don't look at it again. So maybe they set it up in a secure way, but 2 years down the road, the configurations need to be updated or updates needs to be run. So I believe that companies need an MSP or like a co-managed support that's just pointing out the risks, and then it's up to them what steps they want to take. But it's hard for them to see, right? It's like almost you read your own essay, you don't see the mistakes that you make. It's better to have someone else looking over and just making sure all your data is secure, all information, sensitive information especially, is secure and on the right, like for Canadians, on the right side of the soil.
Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it, actually, about sort of marking your own essay. That's a good way to think about it. And are you seeing that your clients, the SMBs, are kind of becoming more aware of the issues? I mean, they must be seeing on the news all the time when you see these huge breaches in nationwide companies. Is that filtering down to small businesses? So when you're talking security, are they more receptive, or are they still, it's never going to happen to us kind of thing?
Also a great question, because unfortunately the news just portray like bigger issues, right? If there is a billion hack, they only like show this one, but the smaller companies who get hacked or have a breach, they're unfortunately not coming up in the news. I've actually seen statistics specifically for Canada for like police reports, where things are not reported because businesses either say like the hack didn't do as much damage. They might don't get money back. They're not interested. They sometimes just shut off websites or do things to get rid of the service, but they don't report it. So there's quite a high number that no one really can see or like really grasp. And yeah, it's difficult for smaller businesses to understand really what's happening without it happening to them. Whereas we always try to train our clients and educate them. I have, in the last 6 months, I have a lot of more trainings on cybersecurity, just basics, refreshers. What is a good cyber hygiene? How should you store your passwords, and like, how should you create them? What are the habits that users should develop, and how are things how should you set up things? What devices you might don't want to have in your network? And like, yeah, users are becoming more receptive, and they're also more careful now.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you say that, because I was just thinking as you were talking, again, in the UK, we get, if there's a large breach, it's publicized, but a lot of smaller breaches probably don't. So I guess no one really knows what the size of the problem is, because no one's reporting a lot of these smaller issues.
Yeah, exactly. And when you think about it, it's like actually 37% of businesses that have breaches, they're under $100,000. And I'm just always asking myself, like, would our business survive if I lose from one of the other second $100,000? Am I able to keep stuff running? Am I able to like keep the processes up running? And most of the businesses, unfortunately, they wouldn't. When I ask this question in my trainings, they all shake their head. So we really have to be careful what users are doing and how they are trained.
Yeah, and I know that you've literally written a book on this in terms of educating end users, but how do you get the balance to educate and inform without trying to sound like it's sort of scaremongering or just trying to make it sound like you're trying to sell product rather than educate?
A lot of the things that user can do, they're literally free. Multi-factor authentication, it's free. It comes usually with the solution, and that just needs to be configured. That's one thing. Second thing, anything in the backend for the configuration about security, is it like JumpCloud, Google Workspace, Microsoft 365? These are all helpful tools. You pretty much pay with your subscription that you can configure the necessary things in the backend. And then, yeah, user training is the most important because you invest in once and then users learn for their personal lives as well. If you just look at password management, it affects their personal emails, it affects their personal bank accounts. So I'm always trying to connect this, and then I feel users are more receptive to it.
Yeah, I really like that. I think that's a great way of doing it because it is personalized. I think we sometimes detach the business and the personal, whereas people are vulnerable for sort of compromises and hacks in their personal life as well, around password breaches and things. So joining it together and saying this is just good practice wherever you're dealing with passwords, that's really good. So we're on to the final question, and you may have answered this actually, because it may have been something we've spoken about already around training, I don't know, but if you had one piece of advice to offer an MSP that was starting out, maybe a lesson that you've learned along your 3.5 years, what would that be?
Yeah, as you said, user training is really important, no matter what solutions they have. But in general, for an MSP specifically, I would say choose one baseline solution that you work with. Really learn it, really try to promote it to your customers and set them up, because there's so many solutions out there and it's taking a lot of time to learn them all. So, and then on the other side, documentation is one of my highest values, because without documentation, you can't grow your team, you can't share your knowledge. So document everything that is necessary for the future, either like configurations, settings, setups, and yeah, share this with your clients, be transparent on what you do.
Yeah, I like that tip. And that's certainly the one around training. I think as MSPs, we're a little bit guilty in the past of being kind of technical and sort of product and servers and bits and bytes and all this kind of stuff, and trying to solve the problems through technology, whereas a lot of the cybersecurity issues can be solved by training the users to be more aware of the threats that are out there.
Yeah. There's actually like 98% of cyber attacks or breaches happen because of users. And if you look at our lives, we're busy, right? There is emails coming in, just like imagine someone on the reception, emails coming in, staff members are just coming up, maybe customers coming in, the phone is ringing, and then there's one email coming in from the business owner, hey, can you just quickly send me that, or like some information? They click the link, the breach happens. So just really stepping back and realizing we don't all have to multitask is also a big lesson for all of us, I think.
Yeah, that's food for thought and great advice. And with that, that's time. So thanks so much for joining us today. Thanks again for your continued business with JumpCloud. We do appreciate it, and hopefully it continues long into the future.
Thank you so much for having me, Chris.